Welcome back to the ITC Podcast. On today's show, we're joined by Ed Sullivan, one of the most experienced economists in U.S. policy and market intelligence. Ed has spent more than 2 decades as a chief economist, held senior roles at major financial institutions, advised on landmark trade agreements like NAFTA, and even testified before Congress. He's also served in senior roles at the CIA and on Capitol Hill. Today, we're breaking down what his experience tells us about where the country is headed. Hey, Ed, Mark Dzeda here. Pleased to have you. I'd like to introduce Ed Sullivan. Ed is an economist who publishes the Sullivan Report. Ed has been with the cement industry for over 20 years, as well as been an economist for other associations as well. Glad to have you here today, Ed.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Ed, my first question for you, what are the maybe 2 or 3 economic issues that you see facing the cement industry today, and what do you foresee, say, maybe for the next 12 to 24 months?
Right now, it's high interest rates. High interest rates are going to restrain private construction activity, particularly in housing. The second issue is if you look at it, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that's where all the money comes for the highways. Well, that's been, the effectiveness and the power of that has been eroded from inflation. And it's a mirror of what it was a few years ago. Well, that's up for renewal in September. So what comes of that? Keep in mind, I don't believe there's any key discussions in terms of what levels they're talking at. But it's going to come in the context of people becoming more and more aware of the big federal deficits. And so that could constrain it and maybe narrow it. So those are 2 of the big issues. I think thirdly is, where is the economy going? There's a lot of uncertainty out there. It's inflation. Is it tariff driven? Are we still waiting on that? Or have we passed that? And also, we see these real strong GDP growth numbers, but it's not translating into the job market. So what's going on there? So that goes to a third area where the construction industry is facing, and that they're facing labor shortages. In the midst of this slowdown, construction is short, and immigration policy adds to that. And we're lucky in some ways that we do have a little bit of a slowdown in the market right now, or that shortage would be much greater, and it would be restraining construction activity. So that's near term. That's what they're doing. I think in 18 months from now, the inflation issues, I think, will be resolved. By itself, that means interest rates will come down because the inflation premium added to the long-term loans is lower. I think, in addition, by then, we will have a new infrastructure bill. In 18 months, as those interests, and I also think we got a new federal chairman coming in, okay? And there's good potential, even though his track record's not this way, there's a good potential that he will reflect some of President Trump's views, and that means a more aggressive easing in monetary policy, which again forces interest rates down. So if you look 18 months, while things right now I think are a little tough, I'm thinking for the next 6 months, what you've seen over the last 6 months is what you're going to see this. Construction restrained. But once we pass this, 18 months from now, you have the potential of lower interest rates, potentially mortgage rates at 5.5%. That unleashes tremendous pent-up demand. You got a strengthening economy that's going to help net operating income for non-residential. It's also going to lower their long-term rates. And then finally, you have the potential of a stronger, more vibrant infrastructure bill. You could be looking at all 3 key sectors that push construction activity being positive. when you have that happening, you typically get growth in the cement industry year over year of 3%, maybe more. So, two different things. It's like the tale of two cities. Right now, things are tough. The market's been in decline for 3 years. It's debatable what this year comes out as. It's probably going to be kind of a saddle year. Give it time. 18 months, 24. Oh, I think you're looking at some good numbers.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like with an election year, you just never know what's going to happen. But I would think both parties, want jobs. Both parties want investment. It's just, can they agree on it, how to do it?
Yeah, and how Congress works now. It sometimes I wonder if it's the best policy for people, or is it just tit for tat against each other? So, and that can constrain what happens.
How do you think the One Beautiful Bill and immigration policy are impacting the cement and the construction industry right now?
Well, the big beautiful bill. I think there's two sides. One is it's going to reduce some of the regulation. That means maybe you can bring some big programs in faster. Okay, maybe that reduces your costs. The second area is right up your alley, Mark, and that's going to be the tax benefits, the depreciation issues. Now, I think both combined will add significant to economic growth. When I say significant, I'm thinking it could add as much as a half a point to GDP growth this year. Mark, that's significant. Now, it's important too, because, in my mind, when I go through everything, it looks like the economy is getting weaker, but then the GDP numbers come out fantastic. So this is going to be a good support for the industry, particularly maybe more so in the second half of the year, but it's there. I don't want to get into the political side of it. Let's just look at the economic side. The construction industry right now faces shortages in labor. It is everywhere. Some states it's more severe than others, but it's everywhere. In our industry, the placement of concrete, it's a higher percentage that we rely upon undocumented workers. It's huge. I've done the analysis and the reports. I think it's in excess of 20% in some areas. Guess what? You also see in specific trades like electricians, et cetera, we don't have enough of those. Well, you can't finish a house if you don't have the electricians. It has a huge impact on construction and specifically the laying of cement. My guess is that the ICE program, it's very aggressive. It will worsen the whole labor shortage issue. And as I was, thinking is that, that labor shortage issue, we're lucky right now, in a way, oddly, perversely, because construction is down. If construction is going to be robust, like I think it's going to be in that 18, 24 months, and we have labor shortages that are aggravated by aggressive ICE actions, it's going to make securing labor tougher. It's going to come out in one way. It's going to be higher costs. And so it's also going to probably delay and maybe forego some construction activity. I don't think those are concerns now. I think there could be concerns when that market turns.
Okay. No, fair enough. Like I said, it's out there, but we're having to speculate, and who knows?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What have you seen out of here in the U.S. production? Have you seen any major changes out there or future growth just in certain areas or just in general? Do you see the industry, how is it, I think some of the laws have changed, or maybe some of the European countries have sold off some of their cement
Oh,
plants, and U.S. companies over here, but now, is there going to be as much push toward green cement? Do you see that coming?
yeah.
Or do you see maybe a little bit of retrenchment? And how do you think the opportunities will be there for the cement industry?
The cement industry and each of those participants, the cement companies themselves, been very aggressive in lowering their carbon emissions. And in many instances, they've been very successful. They're looking at fuel substitutions, and they're looking at, putting PLC, Portland limestone cement, which reduces the carbon dramatically. And so those are all going to continue. Now, I understand that the present administration is not as worried about climate change and all that as, say, the previous administration is. But it seems to me that the industry is still very much committed to it. Now, perhaps that's because many of them are foreign-owned, European-owned, and they haven't taken that step back. So I think that's a constant. It may not have just as much of an attention from the administration, but that's a constant. Here is an issue, though. In my mind, if you look at where they go green, they have all these, materials and material substitution and fuel substitution. If you look at the end of the day, in order for them to meet their goals, carbon neutrality, you're going to have to see carbon capture. Extremely expensive. Also, you're going to require pipelines that go into that. It's really just the testing on that for a cement plant are really only ongoing now. I think we have the first plant going in. But, there's a question whether you can get the technology and the pipeline all working in time for that, 2050 carbon neutrality. That's the biggest question I have. To get that going, you need the government support. So the issue is, will the current administration continue to fund it to meet that goal? And I have some concerns about that. Maybe the best is we're going to lower the carbon, going to lower significantly. Designating zero by 2050, that might be where they might be off a little bit.
One of the areas that I see a lot of announcements being made is people are talking about investing in, AI, artificial intelligence, data centers, hyperscale data centers. Of course, then there's what they call behind the meter power, dispatchable power. It needs power to operate these data centers. They need water to operate these data centers.
Yep.
But I also know that a lot of that power generation, especially if it's, say, small nuclear, modular reactors, just power plants in general require a lot of cement, and then maybe the roads to the data centers is going to require a lot of, cement, concrete. What are your thoughts on data center construction and power plants? Do you see a large impact on the cement industry, from what you can tell now?
I think it's, right now in the context of high interest rates and nothing else is moving, this is an exciting area. Mark, I've done estimates on this, on the data center. And, if you look back at 2020, it was roughly about a little more than 100,000 tons of cement that went into data center construction. Last year, it was over 1.5 million tons. Now, that goes from almost nothing to something significant. You've seen tremendous growth rates. This year, we're expecting to go from about 1.5 to 2 million. the growth continues. It's exciting. If you're in a region and you have a hyperscaler in there, it can change what your year's performance looks like. From things where the cycle is pressing housing down and everything else to this going on, you did pretty well. I think it's important to put things into perspective. While I think data centers are going to continue to grow, and you're right, the infrastructure has to go there. The energy construction of these modular nuclear, I think that's coming too. And this is also data centers. Also, this onshoring thing is going on too. We're building some big plants. And so that adds to it. I did an analysis on the onshoring, and there was as much cement consumption generated on the secondary impacts, building the roads, building the housing that goes with it, et cetera, than there were in actually the facility. So there are huge secondary impacts. Put it into perspective. So it's going to be 1.5 this year. Out of what? 100 million ton market? Still relatively small. It's probably less than 2%. And it's going to go up. Strong growth. Maybe it'll go to 2.5% of the whole market. To put it into perspective, in the non-residential arena, which is where data centers lie, retail is 5 to 6 times the amount of cement is consumed annually there than currently data centers. And I don't need to tell you that retail construction is down. Its weakness is and sometimes offsetting fully what's going on the data center. The other thing too to keep in mind, Mark, is when you look at these hypercenters, that's really where the big volume is going to be. Okay, there's the edge in I can't remember all of it. There's the edge and the small ones from 10 to 20 million to the hyperscalers, which could be $1 billion. But if you look at that, it's concentrated in a few key states. Texas is one of them. Ohio, Virginia is big. I think you see Arizona and Oregon. But there's a lot of states that you're not getting the hyperscalers. And it's just because, energy or workforce issues. But it's going to be dynamic over the years to come. It really is. It's not going to just go away. It's where our economy is going. We're going much more on this tech side. And that's a structural change in what our economy is all about.
Okay. No, good points all. Like you say, data centers, small, but they said it's all that related secondary market that goes with those, where they're putting them. But yeah, you're right. We see them in Texas, Virginia, Arizona, even places like Ohio.
Yep.
And Louisiana's got a big Meta one going on. So
yep.
Cement is not always generated in the right places. And, I don't think there's not a cement plant in the state of Louisiana. So obviously some of these places you're going to be having to bring in the raw material for that data center, I guess, import it, whether it's by rail or by boat or barge or whatever.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, Mark. When I go out to these conferences, so I was at the World of Concrete, and I talk to people because that's really, what? I immerse myself in numbers. You really get an idea what's going on when you talk to people. And I could talk to some people and they're saying, Ed, it's not good. It's not good. And then I can turn around and talk to someone else and say, it's fantastic. Because they've got the hypercenters going in, that it can make that much of a difference. And so, and it's very regional. You could be in a state where you got the construction of a hypercenter going on, but in the distant parts of the state, they're not getting much of an impact. So, it's interesting what's happening.
we talk about, maybe demand going up, maybe even a 3% growth rate. Of course, I don't know how balanced you would say the U.S. production is versus imports, but what role do you think tariffs are playing right now, and what role could they play should the market start growing at, say, 3% a year? Because you don't just build a cement plant overnight and get the production, next year. It takes years to get permits and build one of these.
If you look at it, there's a couple things that I think will happen as the market responds in terms of volume consumption. You're going to see the utilization rates rise, first of all. You're going to get that overhead. The fixed cost is huge. You're going to let the utilization rates rise. Once you approach 80%, I think, then you'll start to see an increased reliance on the imports. Now, look, things don't always grow all in a nice synchronized way. So could you see certain regions see imports increase at a fast rate? Sure you can. I think as you get toward the end of our forecast horizon, so this is now 28, 29, 30, that's when you're going to see renewed increase on imports materialize. Now, I think it's going to be, the tariffs, first of all, will they still be in play? Will they be in effect? I don't know. I can tell you right now from what I've seen, they've been absorbed. Much of them have been absorbed so far. Now, are they absorbed by the importer? I believe so. Are they imported by the distributor? Could be. But you look at prices in the market, at best now, they're holding flat. There's regions where you see prices falling. And that's kind of the conditions where we see it going forward, really at least through the first half of next year. And so that means if there is tariffs still in play, they're not impacting they're not impacting the consumer of cement. They're impacting whoever's, absorbing those tariffs in terms of margins. And the industry does very well in terms of margins. So it has some room to absorb them if they need to. I think it's really going to be out again when the market is in full recovery that you see an increased reliance on imports. And, going back to the thing, you can't just build a cement. No, you can't. And in fact, you could, there's plants that are expanding, et cetera, modernizing. I got it. But to build a greenfield plant, I couldn't even guess how long that takes. I'm guessing 6-8 years. I don't know. And, the costs now associated with building it, with all the environmental regulations, even if some of them are pushed down right now under the current administration, that's no guarantee that they're going to be, that way in years to come. And the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that globally, there's a glut in terms of capacity. And so it might be the easier way to go is rather than build these things, maybe you build terminals or what have you, and you increase your reliance on the imports going forward.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Now, of course, I'm here in Texas, and we've got oil out in the Permian Basin, and you've got it, all the way up to, say, North Dakota and East and all that. And of course, that requires a certain type of cement. And of course, now with Venezuela, shall we say, coming back online, do you think people who are in that industry? I know it's pure speculation at this point, but do you think if the oil supply increases, demand for production here goes down, do you think that'll impact some of the people in that industry, or it's too early to tell at this point?
So when you look at this, I think it's important to recognize that Texas oil is a heck of a lot cheaper than most oil around the country. So, and I can't remember the exact break even, because they have the break even. I think it's in the low 60s. Texas is okay. So do I think as oil prices drop, there'll be less oil well cement consumed? Absolutely. Doesn't necessarily mean it's Texas. There'll be those who are the higher cost So maybe it's, some of the shale producers, et cetera, that have a much higher costs exposure.
Yeah, and if they start bringing on oil online in other countries, which may or may not happen, that cement there will probably be supplied by another region anyhow.
Yeah. Keep in mind, it's an important sector of overall cement consumption. Oh, what is it? Maybe 5% total demand. So again, incrementally, you could get changes in that, and it doesn't upset, the apple cart too badly. And it's also very regional. It's going to be the Southwest that get hit more than anybody else. So Louisiana, or Texas, New Mexico, whatever.
What are some of the issues being brought up that we didn't touch upon, or that you're starting to see, or maybe you heard talked about, maybe at the World of Concrete, or just some issues that I haven't addressed today that we should be aware of or consider going forward?
A lot of them you've touched on. One specific thing that I'm working on right now. So I have to do a 5-year forecast, and this actually did come up at the World of Concrete, and the guy was very concerned. His son was graduating from college this year, this May, and he's heard about all this difficulties in terms of the graduating class finding jobs, and a lot of it's because of AI. We talk about all the construction activity and what AI can bring, but there's a potential that it's going to cause a restructuring in terms of labor markets. And the way I look at this is it's going to occur in stages. So there's people who say, it's going to kill all these jobs and we're going to be massive unemployment. And there's other people, no, it's like the auto industry replacing the horse and carriage. It's going to create jobs. I think both are right. It's timing. It begins in stages. And it first starts with the adaptation of it and realizing you don't have to hire that new person because you can get through there. And I think that's what's happening right now. I think AI is already started gradually to transform our labor markets. And it will continue to build. A year from now, we might be seeing some job losses as a result of it. And it's only when the AI reaches a certain threshold that you start to see the jobs being created. But I think we have to go through this cycle. It's a cycle, stage cycle. And I think we're only just in the beginning parts of it. So I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see some easement in jobs. Now let's translate that back. We got a labor shortage in construction. Might some people want to go into construction? Sure. They don't have necessarily the skills, etc. And so I think we're going to have to turn to maybe some of our community college, trade schools, etc., to see if we can't train some of these. We got shortages of electricians and plumbers. These are skilled trades. And so I think that's maybe it helps some of the shortages that we see in the construction industry. It might be AI that helps us relieve things, particularly as we hit those peak years, 3% growth in 28, 29, what have you.
Great. Well, Ed, that's all the questions I have.
They were good ones, Mark. Hey, next time, if we do this again, I want to see those questions so that they're easy ones.
Well, oh, come on, Ed. You've probably forgotten more about the cement industry than 5 of me would ever know. No, I really appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, I know you've attended some conferences. You were at, like I said, World of Concrete. I think you've gone to the Texas, TACA meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if anybody's informed on the industry, that would be you. And I know you're also very busy, so I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some of your hard-earned knowledge with us today.
Mark, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.